wind back 5 weeks ago, I didn't really know anything about my cervix. Surely someone's speaking about this. Finally, somebody else is asking the questions that I was feeling inside.
The whole aim of me developing this body of work has been to provide information for women to know that they can heal when they are facing abnormal pap smears. There is basically no support. What is cervical dysplasia? It's basically a precancerous condition. I was literally told, you're young, you'll heal, don't worry about it. What can I do to help myself? I was told the only thing that you can do is surgical removal of the abnormal cells on the face of your cervix. Terrified me. A miracle happened. This voice inside of me said, Denell, something is wrong. We're going to figure this out. I changed the entire framework in which I approached my body in my mind. This is like a new way of living now, and how I approach my body and my cervix.
Okay, so listeners, I have a really, really special guest today. I just mentioned this off air. I am super fangirling because I've been reading and, all about your story, and your amazing work. And yeah, I feel so lucky that you're going to be sharing all of your work with the Moody Girl audience today. So welcome, Denell. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing so great today. Thank you for having me, Emily. I'm honored to be on your show and to be introduced to your community.
Amazing. So, wind back 5 weeks ago, I, didn't even know what cervical dysplasia was. I didn't really know anything about my cervix. I didn't know what it looked like. And then the diagnosis happened, and, everything was, felt like was taken away from me, in terms of almost like my freedom. I felt like I still do, have felt like I've had this huge thing weighing over me, and I've lost kind of ownership of my own body.
Mm.
So it was only when I think I was week 2, and it was like 2 weeks of proper, like, felt like mourning. Um, and then I just Googled on Spotify. I was like, surely someone's speaking about this on Spotify, right? And I came across your interview with Nicole Jardim. And that was just like, I literally, like, if I can describe it, it was like I was in bed, I like chucked the covers back, and I was just like, right, action, and it was just like, finally, somebody else is asking the questions that, I was feeling inside. So for anyone who hasn't heard of your work, can you please give us a little bit more of an understanding of your own backstory with cervical dysplasia and how you're where you are now?
Yeah, so my business brand, my work is called Cervical Wellness. And the whole aim of me developing this body of work over the last 7, 8 years has been to provide information and an outlet of possibility for women to know that they can heal when they are facing abnormal pap smears. Because, it's actually amazing how many women in the world have the diagnosis of HPV or cervical dysplasia, get that abnormal pap smear, and there is basically no support or
Mhm.
information about how women can help themselves. And so, my story is very much like so many other women who go into this sort of work. Is I had HPV and cervical dysplasia. I was diagnosed at 19 with my first abnormal pap smear, and for the first 4 years of my diagnosis, I was literally told nothing about what was going on. I was told that, oh, you're young, you'll heal, don't worry about it. So I didn't worry about it. I was in my early 20s. I'm not going to think about something
Mm.
unless, it's made to be seen as dire, and it wasn't then. Yet as the years went on and the dysplasia progressed, it got worse and worse and worse. And for people who are like, well, what is cervical dysplasia? It's basically a precancerous condition. It's abnormal cells that are being presented on the face of the cervix, and abnormal cells if they're left untreated or unchecked, can then develop into cancer. So, as the years went on and I continued to have these diagnoses, the dysplasia got worse and worse, and HPV was still showing up on my test. And, you know, during those initial 4 years, I would ask my doctors questions like, what can I do to help myself? Like, is there anything I can do? And the only thing I was told that was possible that might help was taking these supplements, folate and lysine. But really, the story that I was told over and over again was that there's nothing you can do. Like, the only thing that you can do is to let us give you the HPV vaccine, which I I asked them many times. I'm like, can you please explain to me how getting the vaccine can help me if I already have HPV?
Mm,
And they couldn't explain it to me. And I'm kind of a stubborn person. I was like, well, if you can't explain this to me, I don't like needles. I don't like shots. Like, I'm not going to just like say yes to this. And the only other treatment besides that was getting the LEEP procedure, which in the UK, I think it's might be called the LETs. There's just different acronyms they use, but basically it is the surgical removal of the abnormal cells on the face of your cervix. And it's done with this like electrized um, device that just like cuts away at the face of the cervix. And in my time and in here in California, they didn't give women anesthesia for that. It was just like maybe some numbing, but for many women, it was just done like while you're sitting on the doctor's table. And I searched online about this procedure, and I found myself on all these forums of women who had had this procedure, who had had really terrible side effects. And I scared myself. I got like really freaked out at the thought of having this procedure done. And I had had colposcopies, which are biopsies of the cervix. And I knew how painful and uncomfortable that was, to then think about having like the face of my cervix shaved off, terrified me.
mm,
So I, out of fear, said no to those treatments. So, at the 4 year mark, I was at the highest grade of cervical dysplasia, SIN 3. It was like SIN 2 reaching into SIN 3. There's 3 levels of cervical dysplasia, 1, 2, and 3, and then it goes into stage 0 cancer. And my practitioners I was seeing were very fed up with me because I wasn't, quote, listening to them. And so they sent me away to this big wig OBGYN to like, so I would listen to her. I would, listen to this, professional, like she was a teacher in obstetrics gynecology. And I had my 7th and final colposcopy biopsy, because after that, I declared I was never going to have another one again.
mm,
And she told me that I still had cervical dysplasia, the HPV probably is still there, but because I was refusing the treatments, there was nothing they could do for me. So I walked out of that hospital truly believing, Emily, that I was going to die an early death of cervical
mm.
cancer. I was 23. So, at this time, there was like no information really online on how you can help yourself. How, like, what is the cervix? What is cervical dysplasia? It was always just like WebMD or, these very medical things that always would point you towards the HPV vaccine or the LEEP procedure, or a cold knife conization, which is like an even more intense removal of the face of the cervix. So, when I went home after this appointment, I had a moment in the shower where I thought I was going to die an early death. And then, like, a miracle happened. I truly call it a miracle. My body, the voice of my body came online, what felt like for the first time ever. And I heard this voice inside of me that said, Denell, something is wrong, clearly, but we're gonna figure this out. We've got this. We've got this. And so then
Mm.
I stepped out of the shower and I was like, I'm gonna do this. I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, we've got this. So then for 3 years, I continued to have abnormal pap smears, but I was on a mission. I did dozens and dozens of hours of research, of combing libraries and research articles about cervical dysplasia, HPV. How does the body heal? How does the female pelvis work? What is female physiology like, and how does it differ than male physiology? And what are the things that we've been learning that have been actually incorrect for our bodies? And I went back to graduate school and I got my master's in integrative health, because I was like, how can the body regenerate? How can the body heal itself? And I was learning I would read stories of radical remission of cancer, of people who had, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And then within like a week, suddenly it was gone. And, there's true miracles that can happen within the body. And I dove headlong into it for 3 years and basically changed my whole life, changed my whole lifestyle, changed the entire framework in which I approached my body in my mind. Um, and, you know, after 3 years, lo and behold, 7 years after that initial diagnosis, I had a pap smear on a Thursday. And on a Saturday morning, my doctor called me from her home line at home, which freaked me out because I thought she was going to tell me I had cancer. But she told me that the pap smears were clear and the
Mm.
dysplasia was gone and
Wow.
that HPV was not showing up in my system anymore. And she asked me, she's like, Denell, how did you do it? So in that moment, obviously I was happy and excited, but then I very quickly devolved into anger. I got very, very angry. And I realized that I had spent 3 years in this like deep educational journey of putting together all of these pieces that nobody else had before. I'm like, why was this so hard for me to, pull all these strings together to find this like cohesive understanding of how the cervix works in the body and how the body heals and regenerates this like very deep place in the female pelvis. And that is the inspiration for the development of cervical wellness,
Mhm.
where I have put together everything I've learned now over the last 12 years, because the learning has still continued, and the cervical healing journey, even after the healing of the abnormal pap smears, has continued. I now have There is now a place for women to turn to when they have that experience of getting the diagnosis, feeling like you said, just completely like in grief and like, what have I done wrong? What can I do? There is now a place that women can turn to. And, um, you know, I never thought I'd be doing this in my life, but here we are.
Mhm.
um, yeah, and it's helped so many women around the world, and I'm very humbled by having my like the darkest journey of my life bring so much light to something that can be so scary.
Mhm. I mean, it's so incredible. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed listening to Danelle's story, because when I first read it in your book, and then kind of delved into your podcasts and then did your workshop, your 101 workshop, um, yeah, it was just eye-opening for me. But I guess like almost when I was first reading your book, it was like anxiety filling, because I was like, wow, I was like, you were so young and you had, this on your shoulders at that age, and doctors who are like, gospel at that time. I mean, I don't think if I was in your position at that age, I don't think I would have asked those questions. I think I would have taken what they said as gospel, and I probably would have gone down a different route. But I'm 33 going on 34, and I've done a lot of, research that, in my 30s. But I think what kind of struck me, which was so incredible, was you were so young and you really made that radical choice. And to the point where doctors were saying, we can't do anything for you. And like for somebody so young to hear those words, I was just like almost like choked up, because I was just like, geez, Louise, like you really went through it. And like, that is so traumatic to have, what we have been in society grown up to look at, as a beacon of hope. A doctor is a beacon of hope. They're supposed to be anyway. And for them to say, no, I can't do anything for you, that is crushing. And the fact that you were so brave and you took those, not, I didn't know it was 3 years, to be honest. And that is dedication, you know? So I mean, hugely thankful for your work, and for being so brave, because without you doing that, then so many other women would not be, learning right now and asking those questions. If I hadn't have, Googled on Spotify that day and listened to you speaking about the cervix and your own journey, I wouldn't be questioning myself, you know? So, yeah, from me and hopefully the audience who can relate to your story, it's a huge thank you, because I am just in awe of your work. Um, so, um, I, yeah, wanted to, I guess, go into, because I know a big part of your book is talking about our connection with our cervix. And because there's been lots of stuff I've seen online, on YouTube, on forums, and it's like, take this supplement, do this, blah blah blah, I got rid of mine, great. And I know, like, as a human being, I'm very spiritual, and I've always, like, been very sensitive. I'm very, like, empathetic. I feel people's emotions. So, when you talk about the cervix, it feels almost, I think you call it a portal. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, talk us through more about, like, I guess, the body mind connection with the cervix, and how you see that in your kind of healing path as well.
Yes, I think that this has been actually the biggest piece within this body of work is the reestablishment of a relationship with this place in our body. And for so many of us women, I mean, almost every single woman that I've ever spoken to who has had any sort of diagnosis in their pelvis, whether that's, in their ovaries or uterus or cervix or whatnot, is there has been like a mental disconnection from the lower half of our body for one reason or another, usually from sexual, reproductive, or gynecological trauma, or being instilled with shame at a young age, or being told by our mothers or families, like, that's a dirty place, whatever. So, you know, in the way that I approach the cervical healing journey, which is what I call the process that we go through to heal our cervix ourselves, and not just on a physical level, but heal relationally as well, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, like the connection to the entirety of our female body. That, the cervix is, I talk about the cervix like as though it is separate from the whole uterus, but it is a part of the uterine body. Like, there's the uterus is like an upside down shaped pear, and the cervix is just the bottom section. And so, the part of the cervix that I focus most on is the face of the cervix, which is the part of the cervix that's exposed in the vaginal canal. And the vaginal canal is not considered like an internal part of our body viscera. Like, it's kind of like a collapsed tube, right? So like things can go in and out, air can go up in there, but the barrier between the outer world, which the vaginal canal I actually consider to be kind of like the entryway to the outer world from our body, the barrier between that and our inner world, our innermost special place within our body, is the cervix, is the face of the cervix. So when we as women are like disconnected from this boundary place, from this portal between our inner world and our outer world, there is a disconnection from not just our body, but from who we are as a whole being. And for us women, not only our own traumas in our own lives, but then, the long history of women being disconnected from our pelvis for one reason or another, is this fragmentation that has happened within us has led us to have just deep stress within our body, low level, continuously, at all times. And when, like, our body wants to be well, our body wants to live. But when we reject a part of our body, when we fragment ourselves from a part of our body doesn't know how to be okay with that. It's kind of like our mind and our ego. It's like we're riding in this bodysuit in a way. And so the way I see cervical dysplasia, or really any diagnosis in the pelvis, but let's talk about cervical dysplasia, is it's our body calling out to us to reconnect, to reestablish a relationship with ourselves in that place that for some reason we have disconnected, we have fragmented from this place within ourselves, and it is creating these symptoms for us to come back home to it, for us to like settle back into it and address the message that it's telling us. And for many, 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 most women, I'd say is when we start to come back home to our cervix, there's so much pain. There's so much grief and fear and anger and like memories that we don't want to ever think about ever again. But our body is saying, actually, we need to integrate this, because until we do, you're going to be popped out of the pelvis. And how can I be well and vital? This is like body speaking. How can I be vital unless the conscious awareness of you, of me, is there as well? And so, the face of the cervix is the termination point of some of the most important nerve pathways in our body. So the cervix is the termination point of the vagus nerve. That's the one I want to name here, but it's also the most innervated in separate nerve pathways. It's the most innervated part of the female body as a whole. So like the clitoris has the most nerve endings, but the face of the cervix, which is the part that if the vaginal canal is opened with a speculum, you see the face of the cervix, that there are, I believe, 4 different paired nerves. So paired nerves meaning it's like the same nerve that then bifurcates and like kind of terminates on either side of the cervix. 4 different paired nerves leading to different parts of the body. And the major one is the vagus nerve, which is actually one of the 12 cranial nerves that comes out of the brain stem and innervates most of our major organs. And it ends in the face of the cervix. So in my mind, I believe that we can't, as women, be fully embodied
Mm.
unless we are also embodied in the face of our cervix, because these nerve endings, these nerve pathway endings, ending in the face of the cervix, like that's intelligence there. Like, like just like we have major nerve endings in our fingers or in our mouth, like that's in the face of our cervix, there is intelligence there.
Mm.
And when we are disconnected from there, when our mind is disconnected from there, we can't fully know ourselves. We can't fully know our place in the world. And a major part of the cervical healing journey is coming back home to this place in our body and facing, I like to use metaphors, the face of the cervix asks us to face our reality. And oftentimes when we start to come back home here, we suddenly start to see and like face our life in a way. It's like, whoa, okay, things aren't actually working for me in this way. Like, and things that you maybe never thought about suddenly no longer feel in alignment with your body.
Mhm.
And it's the intelligence of the face of the cervix that guide us back home to what is actually good and right for the well-being of our body. So I know I kind of went in a circuitous way there, but I hope that made
Not
sense.
Yeah, no, that's like I read something, I've written it down here that I wanted to read actually because it's kind of similar to that. But I would say like after reading your book and then, kind of following your journey, like for me, in the space of 5 weeks, 6 weeks, like I have made so many huge life decisions, and like it's almost as though, like, as you say, perfectly described there, as like me coming back home and realizing who I am, and like what have I been doing with my life for the past few years to get me into this state? Why is my cervix communicating in this way? There's something underlying that I'm not looking at. And I feel as though, in a way, and I'm really pushing very hard to heal this naturally, but and I'm very cautious because I'm not there yet. I'm very much the beginning of my own journey, but in a way I've seen it as a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because I'm like, actually, it's really helped me to face up to situations in my life and make some really hard decisions, which actually don't feel very hard anymore. I'm like, what was I doing? Hello, So I 100% relate to that. And I saw something the other day and I sent it to my mum and I was like, this is like, hits the nail on the head. I saw it on your Instagram. So it says dysplasia manifests when we reject the beautiful divine essence that is unique to each and every one of us. From moving through the birthing portal of the cervix, dysplasia to me is a sign of self-rejection. And I was just like, mic drop. Like, that is so, like, hits the nail on the head. And I just kept on reading it and reading it and reading it because I related to it so much. And I think that is exactly what it is, and I think that was probably the missing link for me when I was starting to try and think even about healing or why I was feeling so upset. And that, yeah, so I 100% think that's something that people should know. And if you are on your own healing journey and you're looking at supplements and you're looking at dietary changes, also this is a huge factor that you've kind of flagged now, so thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
um so, I mean, I have very much changed my diet since this diagnosis. I'm somebody who has naturally quite a lot of inflammation in the body, whether that's been from chronic stress. I have psoriasis, so autoimmune issues. And so this made me really think about what I was putting into my body. So very much on a anti-inflammatory diet. I was vegetarian for 3 years. I've now brought back in fish and some poultry as well. And it was somewhere that I read that you were speaking to a client and you were saying, communicate with cervix, do a meditation. What does your cervix want? And your client was like, it keeps saying steak and I'm a vegetarian, And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on how diet can affect the cervix and in specifics, dysplasia? And what happens if you are a vegetarian and you all of a sudden start craving meat? Like, is this what the cervix needs?
That's a really good question. So, just like with any part of the body, in order to heal, it needs energy, and we really only have a finite amount of energy within our body at any given time. And the way that our body produces energy is within the mitochondria of the cells. So it's like an organelle, it's like one of the little pieces of the cell. It's called the mitochondria, and it produces ATP, which is the energy that our body uses to do the things it needs to function. So if we are nutritionally depleted or deficient, our body will use the energy that it has is just to stay alive, and it won't be able to allocate any extra energy or any energy to the regeneration of something that is going wrong. What I have found is that animal products are the most nutritionally dense foods available.
Hmm.
And for the female pelvis in particular, like saturated fats coming from animals and animal products like meats fuel the body in a way that has like a sustained and long trajectory creation of energy that vegetables and plant matter, even plant fat like coconut oil or avocado oil, that just can't match. So, it's a tricky thing because I do know that there are many women who are vegetarian and vegan, and I do my best to work with women around that. And I do often push a little bit around, well, what about just like taking like as a supplement? You can take oysters as a supplement, or
Mhm.
organs if you're even feeling wild, like beef liver, this sort of thing, where you're not actually tasting it. Or you can put like butter in a capsule to sort of like taking it as a supplement. But what I have found is if you are wanting the timeline to be quicker and your body to be like topped off in energy, to be able to allocate it to the regeneration of these cells, because like the way that the cervix heals is, it's not like the cells that are already dysplasic suddenly change and they are back to normal. Actually, what happens is the cells that are already abnormal is they go through their life cycle and they die.
Mm.
And what happens is then the body, in the creation of the new cells, there's like this constant flow of cells that are being produced on from the cervical canal to the face of the cervix. It's like this flowing torus in a way from the
Mhm.
cervical canal to the face. Is we're actually wanting to support the body that in the creation of the new cells, that they actually remain normal instead of then in their life cycle turning abnormal.
Mhm.
So, like, once the cells are already abnormal, there's nothing you could do about that. They just have to go through their life cycle and then they get absorbed by the body and die. But what we want is the body to have more than enough energy to then create those new cells and for them to remain normal. So, in my years of doing this work with cervical wellness, when I first started, I would be a little more accommodating for women who are vegetarian and vegan. Like, oh, well, you can just, supplement, animal protein with beans and this, not, whatnot. But in the last 2 to 3 years, my mind has actually really shifted in kind of pushing a little bit and saying, like, if you are having these diagnoses, this is an indication of depletion, like
Mhm.
not just on a like energy level, like I'm stressed, but your body is depleted and is unable to actually recover from this, because
Mhm.
our body produces abnormal cells everywhere all the time. I mean, that's what like freckles are. Like it is said that we have cancer in our body at all times. It's just our body, kills it off and does what it needs to do. But if it is remaining there, if it is stagnated, that means there is a depletion. And if you want to help that in the best way possible to fuel your female physiology, animal products are like penultimate.
Mhm.
So obviously, I would never shame or force anyone to do this, but I am pretty honest now in saying, like, if you don't want to taste it or whatnot, like supplement with it.
Mhm.
And there there needs to be a willingness to change, to do things differently. Because if you have continuous dysplasia or even continuous HPV, like if your immune system isn't able to overcome this virus, that is also a sign of depletion.
Mm.
Something isn't working. That means
Mhm.
something in your life isn't working.
Yeah.
And we have to be soft within ourselves to and malleable to make these shifts. So, it's a touchy subject, but at least I've been seeing on social media, oh, now like maybe a turn towards like deep nourishment for women and turning towards more like hearty foods like bone broths and these sorts of things. It's because our uterus and our pelvis and just our hormonal system, the female system in general, really does require a lot of energy to function healthfully. We have a lot going on in our bodies. And if there is persistent dysplasia, that is an indication of nutritional depletion. And I would advocate for the implementation of animal products.
Mhm. And I think for me, it makes a lot of sense because I was, yeah, for 3 years, I went fully plant-based in lockdown because I, did it for my autoimmune condition, started with the juice cleanse, did that kind of thing, and kept on that path for a really long time. But then also got down a bit of a rabbit hole of having fake meat to replace that, which is just processed and was destroying my gut. So it was really counterproductive. And I had HPV for 3 years, and that shows to me that there definitely was depletion. And also something to note, like, I really didn't know that HPV was something that could, I don't know, they never, after I got that letter, sat me down and said, hey, this is what HPV is. Like, your immune system is compromised right now. Why don't we think of some ways, let's boost this immune system? Like, I wish somebody had sat me down and had that conversation because, similar to you, when you first, got your diagnoses, you were young and you were just like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. This is going to be fine. And it was the same as me. I'd have this letter, okay, HPV again, it's all good. But no, it's not all good. There was depletion in the body. And that's something else I was going to bring up is I know you talk a lot about like lineage and heritage and looking back into like my mother's lineage and my father's mother and their kind of lineage. And when I thought about that, like both sides of my family are very much like meat eaters. Like I come from Polish and Lebanese descent, and then even my mum who's British, they're all very much like chicken, and we've never had vegetarians in the family. So I have always been like the odd one out in that respect, since I've been embarking on this journey. And so when you started speaking about just more of the heritage and where that kind of slots into that healing journey, I was like, okay, I'm going to incorporate, oily fish is back in my diet. I had like a chicken broth today for dinner, which was amazing. And at first, yeah, it was weird. The texture was a little bit strange again to introduce, and I felt bad about it. But then I was like, this is for my body and this is for my healing process. So as you say, yes, it can be a controversial topic. But if we're talking about healing your cervix, then it's something that we need to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I'm seeing more and more conversations around this being had. And, something I've said that was controversial is like your body doesn't care about your ideology.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's like
yeah.
our beliefs and feelings about something, like the body doesn't care about it actually.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that's like where you kind of have to, you like come against your brain and your heart versus the needs of your body. And I acknowledge that. And I've witnessed and held women through that transition. And my client who you referenced, who was like, my body just wants steak. Like she sent me photos. No, she ended up buying like a hamburger, I think. And she like made the hamburger and she sent me a voice note. She's like, Denell, I just ate that in like 3 minutes. Like couldn't even think about it. My body just like woofed it down. And she hadn't had red meat in, gosh, like 10 years. Um, so yeah, I know that the transition can be hard and like there's a lot to work through. And, you know, she ended up healing her sin 3 cervical dysplasia in less than a year. So
Wow. And that was what I was going to say to you actually. So, um, actually, you talking about how the cervix heals itself was really great for me to hear that just now because I didn't really kind of understand how that happened. It all feels very abstract. So I'm like doing all these good things for my body. I'm making like big life changes, but like inside I'm like, is it working? I don't know. So it's like this abstract journey where you're like, I think I'm getting better, I feel better, but is my cervix better? You know? So like in terms of the abnormal cells, do they differ from person to person in terms of like their lifetime? Like, can they go in like 3 months? Can they go in 6 months for somebody else? Can it take 2 years for somebody else? Can they be like way more stubborn than in some people?
yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, for me, it took 3 years
Yeah.
of like finally, but I had to figure this all out myself. But I have received stories of women who have like taken my program or with my clients. Generally, I find it takes, for like lower grade of cervical dysplasia, I'll just say on average about 6 months.
Hmm.
For higher grade, I've seen it take anywhere from like 7, 8 months to like a year and a half.
Hmm.
However, that's just average, because I've also known women. I had this story actually made me cry, because I don't know what this woman did, but she healed herself in 6 weeks of like
What?
sin 2, sin 3. Yeah. Her mother actually emailed me being like, it just said my daughter in the headline. She's like, you are an earth angel. You helped my daughter in a way that I don't think you ever could understand. And I'm just like, I was crying, like, how 6 weeks? Like, what? Like, she had a pap smear, then she did my program. I don't know. It must have been, yeah, like one of those spontaneous remission experiences, like a
Wow.
spiritual homecoming in her body. And so, it is different for every person. And I like what I would love to just speak very briefly on what I see as like the foundation of the cervical healing journey, of why I say it takes 6 months,
Hmm.
is for the first 3 months of really diving into the information, diving into like kind of reorienting your brain around like, oh, like my cervix, I'm going to have a relationship with her now. For the first 3 months, it's really like a reorientation. Like, you're living life one way, and then suddenly you get this diagnosis, and then you're diving into the work. And it takes 3 months to like kind of reorient yourself to this, like, okay, this is like a new way of living now, and how I approach my body and my cervix and my pelvic well-being. And then for the next 3 months, it's really just like settling into the day in, day out, like chop wood, carry water experience of being in relationship with your cervix and your body in a devotional way.
Hmm.
And that's why I don't know, this is just all like anecdotal, but that's what I have seen happens, especially with my one-on-one clients, is like after that 6 month mark, it's like, okay, like I feel like I'm fully, like I've landed in my body now.
Hmm.
I'm in my cervix. I've like faced things that I've needed to face. I've made the changes. I've deeply nourished myself. I've taken those supplements for 6 months. I've done the self-care practices. And it's like at that time, body's like, okay, like we are actually on the trajectory that feels good in life. I don't have to keep shouting this message anymore. And then
Hmm.
the dysplasia is gone. So that
Hmm.
is what I have seen time and time again. That timeline can obviously be different, but I would say like, yeah, 6 months to a year, depending on the grade of dysplasia.
Hmm. That's honestly, I can't explain how comforting it is just
Mm.
to hear you say that, because like I've developed like a real fear of speaking to my doctor, and the kind of stage where I'm at the moment is I've refused the LEEP procedure. They told me first of all it was sin 3. They think it's sin 3. And then they did a biopsy, which by the way was so traumatic. Like, had no idea like what that was going to be like. It felt like they were grabbing my cervix out of me, and then instantly was hit with period cramps. And then for the next week, just horrendous when I was going to the toilet. It wasn't great. But then I got the letter and they said it was sin 2. And so he said, but your age. I said, listen, I'm healing I'm really working on healing myself. I'm doing this, please give me at least 3 months to try and work on this myself, and then we can have another conversation. And he was really concerned, and like instantly when a doctor is concerned, then that puts anxiety. I was at work, I went into a meeting room to take the call, and he was like, yeah, we think that it might be in the crypts, but we're not sure. um and we don't know because the microscope doesn't go that far. And I'll have to take it to a multi-board, like a multi-board of doctors basically. So I was like, that's where we left it, and I haven't heard anything since. But he made me feel as though I was like archaic, like I'm 33, so because of my age I'm not going to be able to heal myself. And I was just like, I said to him, why, are you saying about my age? I don't feel that I'm old. I feel as though I don't smoke. I'm not drinking. I'm doing everything that I can to, I'm researching it. I'm working with a Chinese doctor. I've got a medical herbalist. I'm doing everything. I'm doing, all your work too. And it's like they don't want to hear it. So just hearing you say that is so comforting because, it does feel a bit radical sometimes, and some people, if my friends who are just worried are like, what are you scared about? It's just a procedure and blah, blah, blah. And when even your friends say that, it's instantly like, oh God, then you start doubting yourself. And so that you've walked it, you're here to tell the story. And how many years clear are you now for the audience?
8.
I mean,
So yeah, I actually just surpassed the time that I had dysplasia and HPV, and I just had a papsmear in April. Yep, and it's clear, and I'm officially 8 years, no issues, and
yay.
yeah, yeah. Well, the thing about Western gynecology, I mean, allopathic medicine in general is, everything is an emergency. It's like,
Mm,
oh, you're presenting this, like like X plus Y equals Z. We have to do this procedure. But the way the body heals is it takes time. Like it has taken time to wind this up, this symptom. It's going to take time to unwind it.
mhm,
And, you know, just because you have SIN2 or SIN3 cervical dysplasia, it doesn't mean you're going to have cancer tomorrow.
mhm,
Um, if you don't get it, if you don't do anything about it or address or check it or like work, on healing your body in any way, yeah, it can develop in a short amount of time. Like I've had women tell me, like 6 months it developed into cancer, but they didn't do anything. They
mhm.
didn't face their reality of how they were with their bodies. So, the the thing that I coach my clients to do is, just tell their doctors like, "Thank you so much for your concern. I will book the appointment when I'm ready."
Mhm, mhm,
And they're going to continue to try to fearmonger and bully,
mhm, mhm,
and just remember that they work for you. Like you are
mhm.
paying them,
Yeah.
maybe it's your insurance or whatnot, but you don't work for them. You're not on their
Mhm,
timeline.
mhm.
And that's a huge mental shift as well. But this is why my book is called Informed, Aware, Empowered.
Go
um,
ahead.
because like it's about empowering ourselves to take back control of the trajectory of our body. And we do have to also understand that yes, there is a risk, but there's also a risk of getting these treatments, and there's also a risk of saying yes to what they want to do. There's a risk with every decision.
Mhm,
um, but with what I have found with the risk of cervical wellness is that the what happens on the other side is just this deep, full belief in our body's ability to recover and heal. And the cervical healing journey is life transforming. And this is kind of strange to say, Emily, but I'm excited for you. Like, I'm
mhm.
excited that you've said yes to this. And I know you're like 6 weeks in, right? 5,
Mm,
6 weeks in. And like,
yep.
this is just the beginning. And I know it's scary,
Mhm,
but for anyone who's on the journey, like just keep going. Like you got this. Like you really do. Like I believe in you. I have hundreds of testimonials of women who have also done it. Like you can do this. You got it.
yay! It's such a relief to hear. And yeah, thank you. So in terms of, I guess I think I've heard you mention it before, and I guess it's really hard to encapsulate your like top tips. But say like anyone out there who's listening and they've gone through what we've been through, they've had their smear test, pap test in the US, and it comes back with some abnormal cells, and they go to have a biopsy, and they've got, cervical dysplasia. What would be your advice for them, for anyone who's listening who may have just started that journey?
Yeah. So the first tip is to educate yourself. So know what the heck is happening in your body and have an understanding of that. And that's, I mean, I have a book, you can read it, it will explain it, but you don't, just somewhere learn like what is cervical dysplasia, what is the transformation zone, which I haven't like spoken to that here yet. What is happening within your body? What is HPV? How do viruses work within your body? Because once you have like education, then you can like orient yourself in your brain like, okay, this is what's going on. Because one thing I have found with women is, the doctors don't really explain anything to us. And so then we're afraid and we don't have the information. And so then we make decisions out of lack of information. We're not informed. So the first piece is to educate yourself in some way. I have a free content library on my website, which has a video that's like about the cervix, intro to the cervix, if you would like that as well. The second piece is to start. So this is again part of the reorientation in your mind. Start to reorient your brain to thinking about your cervical well-being every single day. And when I say that, I don't mean like pile on 20 different self-care things and you're going to just change your life overnight, because that sort of process overwhelms us and then we tend to stop and then not do anything. But my suggestion is to just do one thing a day, every single day, on behalf of your cervix. And this is like coupled with nourishing yourself and just taking care of your body in general, making sure you're moving, drinking, hydrating, the very basics of taking care of your body. Added onto that, just one thing a day, every day. This can be as simple as in the shower, putting your hands over your womb and just like consciously breathing into your cervix, like taking 3 breaths there. That can be the one thing a day. Other self-care tips are like doing a vaginal steam. You can even just like intentionally going outside somewhere in nature within your mind, saying like, this is on behalf of my cervix. One thing a day on behalf of your cervix allows for longevity to happen, because like I said a moment ago, if we try to pile on too many things every single day, we get overwhelmed. And the third tip is to be in it for the long haul. The healing journey, the cervical healing journey is a marathon, not a sprint. And so it's really important that you work with your nervous system and the fear that wants to come up. And as you mentioned, having others' fears placed on you, your friends, your family, your doctors. So in some way, like tending to your nervous system while having that fear surround you. It's like keep coming back to the knowing that your body can heal. This is why I said in my story, like I would read stories of people who have healed like stage 4 cancer, because that like solidified in me like, okay, it is possible to heal like these crazy things, like way worse than my situation, and other people have done it. So yeah, like whether that's like journaling, journaling out about what longevity means to you, like being in the marathon, what sort of fears come up, how can you tend to your nervous system? If you need to find a therapist or some sort of mental health support around this, I highly recommend that as well. But that combined with, the one thing a day, every day, plus educating yourself and like bolstering yourself with information. Also in the free content library I have a whole host of like research articles where if you want to see like the data of different things, like that's there too. That is like a really solid foundation that you can then build upon. And go slow with yourself. There's really no rush. I know it feels like there's a rush, but our
Mhm.
body doesn't rush. Like we can't rush the process. Um, and I like to use a word that to characterize what happens on the cervical healing journey, that when we start to do the one thing a day every day, educate ourselves, tend to our nervous system, there is an unfolding that starts to happen where as you are connecting with your cervix and taking care of yourself in this new and intentional way, like in your inner world, you'll have inner revelations about what needs to happen next. Like, I can't tell you what needs to happen next. It's as you are on the journey, it starts to unfold. And like the layers of, I call like cervix like this multi-dimensional onion, like it starts to peel back and suddenly like new things are revealed. And if you follow that, like with the inner wisdom that comes up as you start to build upon this foundation, if you actually follow and listen and take action upon that wisdom, you'll you'll be well on your way
Mhm.
to receiving the results that you desire, which is a clear pap smear. So that's where I would invite people to start.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. Um, I was going to ask actually, with your clients, because this is such a transformational journey, and do you see people quite literally like coming in as one person, and then by the end, are they like a different person, or like their authentic selves? Are they like, ta-da, this is who I've been dying to be the whole time, but it's been trapped inside?
Yes, actually, it's
Yeah.
I didn't really know what I was witnessing at first because I'd be like, whoa, like this is well beyond just like women's health. Like people are changing their whole life. Actually, one of my clients I had last year, she moved to LA to have her like lifelong dream of being a rock star. And now she's like singing shows and stuff. And she's like, Denell, cervix led me here. And like she was not, she like it was something she always wanted to do. Anyway, it's it's really, really beautiful to witness what happens when we start to heal our relationship with the creative, generative place within our body, our womb, our cervix, the birthing portal, birthing ourselves out into the world. The other thing I've noticed is women, once they go through this journey and like then they heal, is suddenly then their whole life path turns into wanting to support women in women's
Mm.
health.
Mhm.
That's happened a lot as well. Maybe not
Mhm.
necessarily like cervical healing, but in some way, like supporting women and healing their connection with their body because it's such a profound, profound journey. So yeah, I'm always excited when I get a new one-on-one client because I'm like, I wonder what butterfly is going to come out of this experience.
But I mean, that's literally how I envision it when you're talking about it. And like already, I mean, we haven't had a one-to-one, but I've been so lucky we've had a one-to-one now, which I feel is amazing. Um, but yeah, I feel as though just from your work, it's like honestly, like a light bulb has gone on, and it's just like, hello, what have you been doing? And so, and thank you for that. One thing I've also been wondering, um, is so I know there's a lot of fear around, I'm on lots of these forums. So obviously after you get this diagnosis, and then like if you're in a long-term relationship and then sleeping with partners, um, you know, what happens? Because men can have HPV, right? But they don't have symptoms, or not that we have symptoms, but it doesn't show up. There's no test for men. So, say, for instance, you get rid of HPV and your partner has it from when you originally may have given it to him, or vice versa. Does that then go back, or is your immune system boosted so much that, it will fight it off instantly? How does that work? So, that's been something I've been worried about.
Yeah, so there's no way to be reinfected with the same strain. So
Okay,
once
great.
you have, because there's multiple strains of HPV,
Hmm.
HPV 16, HPV 19, HPV 24, like there's like so many different strains.
Hmm.
So like once you have one strain in your body, it's actually always within your body. Like viruses, you don't ever like eliminate them fully. What just happens is the immune system develops the intelligence to be able to just keep it at bay. That's um the way viruses work. So like if you're in a long-term partnership, it is very likely that they have the same strain of HPV, but
Hmm.
it's not like that HPV will come back into you, because you already have it and your body is already like working, your immune system is already working on developing the antibodies and whatnot for that
Okay.
strain. Now, for people who are not in a long-term monogamous relationship, that is a little different, because you can be infected by different strains of
Hmm.
HPV. And so, this is where like having protected intercourse is important, and also just being um, open to communicate about it, because HPV can affect men's mouth and throats, actually.
Hmm.
So if there's any sort of like oral sex and he doesn't know about it, like there's something there. However, I do want to name that HPV is the most prevalent STI in the world. It is said something like 2/3 of the human population will have contracted some
Wow.
form of strain of
Mhm.
HPV in their life. And so, like, yes, it can cause issues in some people, yet if people do take care of their bodies, and if people are concerned, like they can take some immune supporting mushroom supplement,
Mhm.
that sort of thing. Um, it is a tricky thing. I have women asking me like, "Oh, can I like never have like sex again?" And I feel like I can't actually answer that, because it's like, what is your risk tolerance, and like how do you feel about, your immune health, this sort of thing. So that's a tricky thing, but for the people who are in relationship, you can't get infected by the same strain. And people who aren't in relationship know that if you have recovered from one strain, you can get infected by another.
Mhm.
However, I like to think that if you're on the cervical healing journey and you are taking care of yourself and supporting your immune system and your stress levels and the sort of thing, that the body will just be able to
Fight back.
battle it out and there won't be an issue.
Amazing. I think that's, yeah, it's an important point, and I think, for anyone out there, it's, because it's, especially if after you have like a biopsy or something, it's so traumatic, and afterwards, the last thing you want to think about is anything going on down there. Do you know what I mean? So, it takes a while to even come back to those thoughts after having, a biopsy. So yeah, so I hope you find that interesting and helpful, audience. Um, so we're coming to the end of our amazing conversation now, Danelle. And for anyone who, isn't aware, can you give us, your website link and your Instagram handle, and so people can find you and reach out?
Yes, of course. So it's very simple. My website is cervicalwellness.com. I'm on Instagram of Cervical Wellness. And my podcast is called the Cervical Wellness Podcast. I just try to keep it nice and nice and easy for people to find me. Yes, if you have any sort of questions, and if you look at my website and you're like, I don't know where to begin, there's a video on there about where I suggest you begin. But if you'd like more like tailored approach, you can always email us at info@cervicalwellness.com, and my VA like has a whole list of like, this is what we suggest for this is what we suggest for that. Um yeah, and reach out if you need anything. I'm pretty active on Instagram, and yeah, I'm here to support the women.
Yay.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has probably been my like most favorite episode because I'm really going through it, and you have really changed the course of the route that I'm going to take moving forward. So audience, I really hope you find this episode helpful today. And yeah, I'll also put your handles in the show notes as well. But thank you for all your work, because without you, we wouldn't be taking these, these informed and empowered steps, as you say from your book. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. It's been such a blessing to speak with you.
And you take care and have a lovely day.
Thank you.